Hi everybody, my name is Emmanuel and today I'm going to talk about spiritual direction. What is spiritual direction? Spiritual direction is about meeting one-on-one with the individual, in which a spiritual director meets with a directee and helps the directee develop a greater sense of God's awareness in their lives. So how does it work? Let me try to explain how it works by trying to contrast that with psychological counseling. So in psychological counseling, the counselor or the therapist meets one-on-one with a client, just like the spiritual director meets with a spiritual directee. And they talk about the personal issues in the life of the client or the directee. So that's where they are similar. Where they are different is, in psychological counseling, the reason why it happens is because of some crisis in the life of the client. They're going through a divorce, or they're going through some anxiety disorders, and so they meet with the therapist to fix those issues. In the case of the relationship between the spiritual director and the directee, the reason why they're meeting is not because of a crisis, rather it is because of a desire of the directee to want to grow spiritually. So that is one key difference between psychological therapy and spiritual direction. Psychological therapy is to fix a crisis. Spiritual direction is to help the person grow spiritually. The other difference is that psychology is a science with a little bit of art to it, whereas spiritual direction is more art with a little bit of psychological sciences attached to the process. So that is another key difference. In psychology, we try to fix people's problems. In spiritual direction, we try to help them grow spiritually. So that hopefully gives you a sense of what spiritual direction is about. Who would benefit from spiritual direction? There are three types of people that will benefit from spiritual direction, or people with three needs that will benefit from spiritual direction. The first is the people that have a sense of stagnation in their spiritual lives. Sometimes we go through our spiritual lives, there is a sense of dryness, a sense of emptiness, a sense of, oh, do I have to go through the same routine again? And that's a sense of spiritual stagnation in our lives. Sometimes those can have legitimate causes as a person spiritually grows. And sometimes there can be some barriers which, if removed, it helps the person grow deeper with a deeper sense of spirituality and a greater sense of God's presence in their lives. So, for example, I'm a Myers-Briggs NF, the intuitive feeler. When I went through a kind of a dry spell in my spiritual life, what I realized is contemplative prayers are something that helps NF personality types to get a greater sense of God's presence in their lives. So this is one thing that when we know what our personality type is and we're able to match that with a spiritual practice, it blossoms our spiritual life. So that is something that a person can work with a spiritual director to try different practices and see what works best and what gives them a greater sense of God's awareness in their lives. A second reason why someone might want to work with a spiritual director is when they go through a period of discernment. We all go through life. We have big decision points that come in our life that pertain to important life events. Getting a job, changing a career, deciding which school to go to, or any of those life decisions. When we go through those life decisions, the place where the spiritual director helps is in helping us process as to whether we are making a decision based on our own self-interest disguised as God's will, or if we are truly listening to what God is trying to tell us to try to find and discover our deeper desires that might give us a direction towards which God might want us to go. So let me be clear. In this case, the spiritual director is not like a seer or a fortune teller who tries to tell you this is what you have to do. No, the spiritual director is more like a sounding board with whom you process through what's going on in your heart while you pray, and the spiritual director might suggest some practices, spiritual practices that might help you as you are going through this process of discernment and listening to what God is telling you and discerning through your own desires and your feelings and trying to make sense of all the conflicting emotions that we go through, especially when it comes to important life decisions. So the third reason why someone might want spiritual direction is when someone has a sense of anxiety and restlessness in their lives. Some cases of anxiety would be rooted in anxiety disorder, for which one might have to meet with a psychologist or a therapist to deal with that. But most forms of anxiety issues most likely have spiritual roots. I'm trying to phrase myself carefully here because I'm not saying that a spiritual director is a therapist who will help you with your anxiety. No, a spiritual director is not a therapist. But when we work through our spiritual lives and get a greater sense of God's awareness in our life, that helps with mild forms of anxiety and restlessness that is a part of everyday life. So that is another area in which a spiritual director can help. So, and again, I've just named three. There possibly are more. So this helps you get a sense of what spiritual direction is about and who might benefit from that. If you have any questions about spiritual direction, please feel free to comment on in the video here. You can also contact me at emmanuel@theoview.org. The email address would appear somewhere on the screen here. So it's emmanuel@theoview.org. Contact me if you have any questions. Thank you. Be blessed.